Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Antry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AV Rant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered. And this is episode 500, Mark II, Part 2, 500.2, whatever you want to call it.
it's going to
We're
be
not
point
calling
one.
it 501.
No, it's 500.1. That's what
Point
it is.
one. Okay.
Point one. That way if
Point
they're
oh, point one.
yeah. That way
Gotcha.
if they put it in their browsers, it'll. I mean, if they put it in like their playlist, it'll do the thing it's supposed to do.
Clever guy.
So
We're back.
I'm super bitter that I have to do another podcast this week, but I am not that because I don't want to do the podcast. It is because I don't want to do it's only because I'm very tired because I stayed up. I had a hard time sleeping last night, and then car troubles. All right, so this is AV Rent, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. Get your questions answered. All you have to do is ask. But before you even do that, you better keep in mind that AV Rant and SVS are partnering up to bring you your choice. If you win, if you're the lucky winner of our giveaway, either two 1000 series subs, the SB or the PB, or a 5.1 Prime satellite speaker package. The details for that contest will be forthcoming when we figure them out.
Yeah.
So,
sorry to bury the lead. The contest is not open yet, but it will just be a giveaway. We're using our dual 500th episodes to announce that there will be a giveaway coming. It will be starting in September.
I guess, okay. If you had sold it as it's a dual 500 episode, then I might have been more into it in the beginning. But we had a huge storm roll through, and I got the power was knocked out for a while. So it was a bit of a stressful day. So if you want your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. To ask, all you have to do is send them in to question@avrant.com. You can also CC Rob at AV Rant or Tom at AV Rant or both. You can go to www.avrantpodcast and click on the whichever show you want to comment on and leave a comment, and we will find it usually because it does pop to the front. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. Twitter, Rob is at First Reflect. I am at avrant_Tom, and our producer, Austin Pond, is at Austin, TEN Pond. For him, he has his own podcast, We Watch Movies. It is a podcast about Pisces.
Okay. The astrological sign or the constellation?
Nope. Things that are fish-shaped or fish-related, but not actually fish.
Okay.
So, very specific, very odd podcast, but it's a Pisces related. That's how they describe it.
It's a good thing we have a 2-part episode this week because his podcast, there will be at least 4 things that it is about this week.
It's always about the thing that it's about.
Go. That's right.
It's a constantly rotating, shifting thing of topics. All right. And in double-barreled fashion, we have new listeners of the week this week.
There you go.
One of them is McMansion Chris, who emailed me directly after last week's podcast and said, I didn't hear my name,
Last
dude.
night's podcast.
Last night's podcast. You're right. And I didn't hear my name, dude. I'm like, what? And I actually looked back, and I couldn't find an email from PayPal at all that told me that he had donated. But I went to the PayPal website, and sure enough, he had. So, Chris, I'm very sorry. Yes, you are one of our listeners of the week, as is Efren, who donated as well, and did Lee V. This is Lee V, not Lee, whatever the other Lee's name.
Levy.
Well, I mean, it's not Lee V. I mean, Levy. Anyways, they went to the website, www.avrant.com, clicked on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link to leave a PayPal donation, and those donations go into our coffers to help support the podcast and to keep us up and running, and it's great. So thank you guys. Thank you, Chris, Efren, and Lee.
Yes, Chris, Efren, Lee, thank you all so much. It's kind of amazing. We have this is like listeners of the day.
I know, but it's the same week. They're just more listeners of the week. Chris was already listener of the week. I just
That's right, yeah.
And usually Efren and Lee's, their donations came in. They would have been next week's, but that's fine. We're doing 2 podcasts, so we're going to have you guys on there.
Yep, it's awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. Efren as well. I am into season 2 of Game of Thrones, someplace after the lady gives birth to whatever the heck that thing was that came out of her. I haven't figured that out yet, but that was where I ended, and I'm looking forward to seeing what I sort of kind of remember that part in the book. I can't remember. Those are really thick, but I don't care anymore. All right, news.
Actually, just before that, we should once again just mention our thanks to Ash, who created our very cool 500th episode graphics. Yes. If you're watching the YouTube video, there's a little graphic at the beginning and our lower third that's showing our names with our cool 500 and fireworks going off and everything. So one of the main reasons I wanted to do 2 episodes this week, otherwise we wouldn't get to use the cool 500 episode logos that much.
We're using it for at least 9 more episodes.
There you go.
We're going to go to 510 for sure. I'm sorry. We are going till 510 at least, because this is some cool stuff. We are going to keep this. Actually, we're going to be using this graphic all the way through the into the contest, since the contest is celebrating our 500th episode. That's where we'll break. Well, it's where we'll make the break.
Okay.
That'll be it.
Thank you to Ash.
Thank you, Ash. No, it really is super awesome. Valens Semiconductor, a member of the HT-T Alliance, responded to a question from a reader at CE Pro who wanted to know when 18 gigabit per second support would be happening and what category of Ethernet cables he should run today in order to be future-proof. For your edification or reminder, the way HT-T works is it has it runs Ethernet instead of HDMI, and they have a proprietary way of doing it. And you can buy the boxes where you run HDMI into the box, and then Ethernet goes out to another box, which then goes back into HDMI.
That's right.
Sort of a thing. And the thing, what's really good about it, is that you can have super duper long runs, and you don't have to have, and the cables are really cheap, and it works pretty well. The downside is that the little boxes tend to be pretty expensive, and you can probably blame the HDMI guys more than the HT-T guys for that, since I'm sure the licensing is what's really driving up the cost. Now, the response to this question about what Ethernet they should run is basically things are just in the works, but nothing is finalized. So even after the spec is finalized, vendors will then have to incorporate new hardware and pass certification. So bottom line is, sometime in August of some year that's not this year, and very well might be not be next year. So they said at least a year, likely more away before we see that.
So I mean, we know that one of our listeners, Sean, is in this boat right now. He's run Ethernet cables already. He was looking to use HT-T, but he wants to use an HDR capable projector. He might be able to get away with the 10.2 gigabits of bandwidth. That is probably sufficient, especially if he's sending 4K 24 hertz. It will be sufficient. But if he starts getting 4K 60 hertz signals with 10-bit color...
Or if he wants to see the menus on things. So.
That's right, yeah. So then you start getting into needing that 18 gigabits. So this is very much applicable to certainly at least one of our listeners, probably more. And so there's more to it, though.
Yeah, so basically... there may be a 2-cable solution that might come to market, which means you have to run 2 runs of Ethernet in order to do the thing that they needed to do. But if you really want to future-proof yourself right now, kind of the optical HDMI cables are sort of the way to go, because their bandwidth is going to be sufficient. So HT-T Alliance themselves, they say they're always aiming for a 1-cable solution. They don't want to do a 2-cable solution. And because they're concerned about existing infrastructure in a lot of buildings, because remember, it's primarily used in like commercial applications and stuff. And it's like, hey, we already ran hundreds and hundreds, thousands of feet of very often Cat 6A Ethernet cable. So they're aiming for that. They want it to be one Cat 6A cable that carries the 18 gigabits per second signal. However, like they were saying, nothing's finalized. They might need to go to 2 Ethernet cables. They might need to go to a higher category, like a Cat 7 category or something like that, in order to make it work with just one. So it's all a bit up in the air, and it's not going to be finalized for at least a year. So maybe get those optical HDMI cables. My Cable Mart cables to go. They might be your friends right now. So Jonathan, after last night's podcast, emailed us right away. I think it was actually during the podcast, that the DTS-X firmware update for the Denon AVR-X2200W and AVR-S910W became available on August 17th, which was like 5 days ago, 6 days ago. 5 days ago yesterday when we got this information. So, strangely, those are the only 7 speaker models in the Denon Marantz lineup that have received the updates so far, according to the logs being kept on the AVS forum. So, of course, a bastion of information.
Well, they're great for that sort of thing.
And well-meaning, very patient people.
for this sort of thing, they are on top of it. They are a fantastic resource for knowing exactly what spec and what firmware things are up
That's
to.
right.
So,
There's those guys who are like on it. They like hit
Mhm.
refresh all day long to see what Denon has changed. You know,
Yeah,
give it
that's
time.
right.
But it does kind of suggest that these 7-channel receivers that are out there will be receiving the update probably soon.
Yeah.
Because 2 of them got it. It's in the works for the rest.
That's right. Yeah. So it was supposed to be. This is the time frame it was supposed to be coming out. So it looks like maybe, fingers crossed, it will actually happen.
So the Dolby Surround Upmixer, well, this is exciting news, can also be used on the DTS soundtracks, and the DTS Neural X Upmixer can be used on the Dolby soundtracks. So once again, some of the folks on AVS Forum have indicated that this cross-brand upmixing will eventually be added to all Denon Rant models via firmware updates. So keep an eye out for that.
I'm kind of looking forward to that. That would be nice to have back. It will bring Denon Rant back to parity with Yamaha, because Yamaha never stopped doing the cross-brand upmixing. For whatever reason, Denon Rant did. I'm sure it was some agreement with somebody. So looks like that's coming back, though. So yay! And thanks to Jonathan, we got to update. We got to update ourselves. Not even have to wait a week.
That's right. All right, Infinite Gary. I understand there's pictures here. At some point, they will be showing up on your screen. If not, then you just listen to my dulcet tones, and I'll describe it to you. Gary bought a Lexicon MC-8 Pre-Pro for his kitchen. Of course. It's old enough that it doesn't have HDMI or HD audio decoding, but Gary only wants it for cable TV, and particularly for its mono listening mode, since he primarily wants to hear sports broadcasters clearly. And his other Lexicon Pre-Pro has the best mono mode that Gary has come across. I read this like 5 times and went, why does he want mono mode?
It's what he wants. He wants mono.
But
so he says
so he's taking a Lexicon and turning it into a clock radio, basically.
Well, he says sometimes, for whatever reason, his particular broadcaster in his area, they mix things wrong. So, everything ends up in the left channel, or, stuff that's supposed to be in the right channel is mixed with the left channel. So he's like, he puts it in mono, everything comes out of the center, it all sounds fine. So that's fine. What he wants.
That's great. Yep. Okay, that makes sense, Gary. Thank you for explaining it to me.
That's right.
All right, he decided on the Revel C208 center speaker. And since Tom has heard that speaker back at CES 2012, anything that stood out compared to other center speakers? What? I heard this.
Well, you wrote an article on Audioholics about it, so that was the assumption.
That is true, Gary. Now, if you look at those pictures, I went back to see what the heck you were talking about, because I'm like, I've never heard a Revel speaker. I certainly don't remember it from. Don't remember anything I heard in 2012, almost certainly, but or very few things. If that was the one I went to the Tannoy demo, I remember that one because of the headache afterwards. But if you look at that, Gary, many of those preview articles that we write when we go to CS trade shows, or any trade show, really, basically the way those work is you go in there, they have the speakers sort of there. Most of the time, they're not plugged in at all, or they're plugged in and some random thing is playing through it. You have no control, and you can't tell really what speakers are on. You're standing there. There's no walls or anything. It's just kind of out in the open. And I couldn't hazard a guess as to how it would sound. That being said, those Revel speakers were not hooked up to anything when I was there. At least not. I mean, you can look at the pictures. I don't see a single speaker cable in any of the pictures I took. So yeah, I may not have even taken those pictures. To be honest with you, there's a group of us that go to those things, and we would fan out and hit different rooms. And if somebody was writing something, and I was done with the material I had collected for the day, very well somebody would say, "Here is the press release that they gave us. Here are the pictures. Start with that, and I'll tell you what I saw when I was there." And I would write it up. That's why it's kind of written in sort of a third personist sort of thing, or it's like we saw this, or you know what I mean?
Royal we.
It means the whole of us at some point saw it. So no information from me, so I'm glad to be of help there. He still intends to have front, left, and right speakers connected. He has a Denon Focus 110 bookshelf speakers on hand, but he also has the Focus 110A self-powered monitors, which are already set up in his kitchen. All right. So the Lexicon MC-8 has XLR outputs. As Denon focused 110As have RCA inputs. Is there a way to use them together? Yes, I have done this myself. Monoprice sells all sorts of cables that will go XLR to RCA.
You don't even need to do that in this case, though, because the
Why?
Lexicon
Do they have-
MC-8 has RCA pre-outs. So
well, there you go. Use that. Why would you bother? Yes, just RCA to RCA.
Yeah,
but it does deserve to mention though that you can buy RCA to XLR cables and all sorts of things to XLR cables that you need, because they know that people are going to run across this thing, and Monoprice is a great source for. That's where I bought them when I needed them.
Right.
So that's.
But yeah, if this comes up quite often, people will look at the back of a Pre-Pro, and of course, one of the first things you notice are this huge bank of XLR connections, because they're a fairly physically large connection, and they stand out because your typical AV receiver isn't going to have them, so they look unusual. So people right away will notice that a Pre-Pro has XLR connections, but then if you check the rest of the back panel there, most of the time, most Pre-Pros also have RCA pre-outs. So since all you need is an RCA to RCA connection, the MC-8 has that. So easy as pie. RCA cables will get you done.
Right. So right now the Focus 110As, and those are the ones that are amplified, I guess that's what the A means, are being used for 2-channel music in his kitchen while he uses a separate soundbar for TV. One option would be to use the passive Focus 110s along with his new Revel C208 center for 3.0 setup, while keeping the Focus 110As as a separate 2-channel direct only setup. So another option would be to have a single setup for both purposes. What would we recommend? Why? What? Okay, so the two. I'm very confused by this whole question.
Right. So he's got these powered monitors. The images that are being shown right now, those are there, but. The powered monitors that he has right now are just in a 2-channel setup. They're not being used when he's watching television. Right now, when he's watching television, he's using the soundbar that is below the television.
Got it. So
that's a situation. So he's like, I could keep them just as the 2-channel setup that they are now, and then add the Revel and another pair of bookshelf speakers, which would actually look very similar because they'd just be the passive versions of these Focus 110s. Or, since the MC-8 does have RCA pre-outs, he could just run everything through the MC-8, have the one pair of powered monitors in there plus the new center speaker, and that would just be it. He wouldn't have a separate 2-channel only setup anymore. Everything would be running through the MC-8. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah, why wouldn't he just do that? Because that seems like the easiest way. Then you just switch from mono mode to not mono mode whenever you're changing inputs, I guess. So the TV input would be in mono mode. Is that what I'm getting?
When he wants it to be, he could also then switch it to 3.0 mode if and when he wants to, right? Whereas if he had this separate I don't know, it would look strange to me having 2 sets of bookshelf speakers.
He's gonna need an amplifier for the Revel center
for the
channel.
passive. Yeah, that's right.
So
yeah, I would
really. It's 6 of one, half dozen of another. I would not put I would not put 5 speakers up front, because that's what you're kind of suggesting.
Right. That's right.
I would not have two for just the 2-channel, then 2 more. I have no idea what those other 2 would do, and then the center channel. So if you're going to have an amplifier anyways that has at least 3 channels in it, I just use the passive stuff. Take the amplified ones and throw them in another room someplace.
Sure,
that's what I would do.
Sure. Yep,
you have to have the
amplifier
amplifier anyway.
That's right. And everything running through your MC-8, like the stuff that previously was 2-channel only, should sound great coming through your MC-8. So I'd have no problems there.
So since the MC-8 is a Pre-Pro, he'll need an amplifier, as we just mentioned. He was leaning towards the Outlaw Model 5000. He already has an Emotiva XPA5 in the room, and just to try something different. So he just doesn't want another Emotiva. So is the Outlaw Model 5000 a good choice?
Yes.
Fine. Good. Yeah.
I would say so. I have zero qualms recommending that one. So
if you gave it to me, I'd be like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, thanks. I would be very happy.
And once again, that Outlaw Model 5000, it does have only RCA connections. It doesn't have XLR connections, but as we described, that is totally fine. So
that's fine too. So one of the reasons Gary opted for the Revel.
It's Revel.
I like saying Revel. I think it sounds sexier.
It's funny because you say Revel, but then focal, which is focal, you say focal. So
I do never say focal. I never say focal. I say focal. Okay, router guy, shut up.
That's
Router.
true. It is rooted.
It is not.
You take a route. Things are rooted from place to place.
There's a bunch of people in Australia right now that just turned us off because you keep saying the word root. And probably Britain too. I don't know. I just know that in Australia they really don't like that word.
I try to say Z. You know how difficult that is for a Canadian.
I know.
Try to remember.
Zeds. The Zeds. They just
say Z.
I like Zeds. I don't like the H's. I can get behind the Zeds.
We don't say H in
well,
Canada.
H is
that's a British thing. That's yeah.
Aren't you guys part of the Commonwealth? All right. Anyways, one of the reasons Gary opted for the Revel C208 is because it offers a boundary compensation switch and he'll have it positioned close to the wall. He knows that the MC-8 also offers a setting called boundary gain compensation. They're both the same thing. Should use both. Only one with. If only one, which one? You use the one in the speaker, Gary.
Yes. And in particular, the one in the MC-8 actually only applies to the subwoofer. I read through the manual there. There definitely is a thing called boundary gain compensation in the MC-8, but it only applies to the subwoofer, and they're saying it's specifically for THX Ultra 2 certified subwoofers because they have a boundary gain compensation thing that's like part of the THX spec. Don't even worry about what. First of all, he's not going to have a subwoofer, so that whole thing is out the window as far as the MC-8 goes anyway. And second, even if you did have a subwoofer, I wouldn't be using that THX setup thing. It's a kind of an odd way to do things. So yes, let's
just go full hypothetical here, and let's say that it did have a boundary gain. Like I've never met a receiver or a processor that had a boundary gain for every channel. I've never met one. It might exist, but I've never seen it. But let's say, for example, this one did. You would still prefer the one on the speaker because the one in the receiver or the processor would be more generalized for general sort of thing, whereas the speaker one would be designed by the manufacturer to compensate for whatever they have measured at when they put their actual speaker close to a wall and they go, okay, this is how we have to do to fix it. So make sure that we apply this DSP or whatever changes to the crossover that we need.
Now privately, Gary sort of asked me if I knew of any other good sounding center speakers that have a boundary compensation switch, because it isn't super common. You don't see it a lot. So I just mentioned the name Focal. It wouldn't actually be part of Focal's regular speaker line, but their Focal Pro series. I would be talking about their Twin 6BE, which is called a studio monitor, but that is a self-powered speaker, the Twin 6BE from Focal. That one definitely has boundary compensation, has the tweeter level compensation.
Hold on, I gotta get up. Hold on, I gotta get up.
Okay. I don't know where Tom is going, but he's looking at something. I assume he's checking a speaker that
my speaker had one. Hold on.
I don't think that Aperion Verus Grant has a boundary compensation switch. It does?
I think so. What is that down there?
I think that's for bi-wiring. I think this is the first time. I think this is the first time we've heard a voice really far away from a microphone on this podcast. It's fitting that it takes place on our 500th episode.
Yes, on stand, rear wall, or in cabinet. There is
really?
A speaker gain compensation switch on. Shut up.
Okay.
I'm coming back.
Yep.
All right. So as I was saying, the Aperion Verus Grand center channel has a speaker, a rear wall compensation switch.
There you go.
You will not be able to put your TV on it because it's rounded all the way around the stupid thing. But yes, it does as well. I knew it.
You own the speaker. That makes sense.
I was pretty sure that was back there, and it is back there. Now, I wish I had paid more attention to where that switch was, because I'm not sure if it's on the right setting or not. Okay, whatever. Calm down. Nick is confused about reference volume. It's his understanding that in the movie theater. Okay, wait a second. Oh, whatever. In the movie theater, does reference volume of 85 dB mean that the quietest sound is 85 dB out of all speakers, and the loudest the main speakers would get is 105 dB for peaks, while the subwoofer can get as loud as 115 dB for peaks? Well, you're kind of partially the way there, because if the quietest sound was 85 dB, holy crap, that would be a loud theater. I mean, or zero dynamic range. I mean, no, it's the test tone that they use to calibrate the speaker, that it's got to hit 85, which means
it's not even
average, right?
Well, yeah, it's so first of all, the part you totally got right was the peaks. So
yes, the peaks is right.
reference volume in a commercial movie theater in all of the speaker channels, and it's important we say channels because when you're talking about the surround channel in a commercial movie theater, there are multiple speakers playing that channel. So it's not
right.
not 105 dB per speaker, it's 105 dB per channel. So that entire bank of side speakers together must produce 105 dB peaks. Your front speakers must all produce 105 dB peaks. And then the LFE channel, which again doesn't necessarily have to be played by subwoofers. It is a separate channel. But the LFE channel, low frequency effects channel, can peak as high as 115 dB. So all of that is correct on Nick's part. The other part is that 85 dB is supposed to be the average. So if you took the average loudness of the movie as a whole from beginning to end, it should average somewhere around 85 dB. And typically, that's A-weighted, which means it could actually be a lot louder because A-weighting rolls off pretty heavily below 500 hertz and pretty heavily above 5,000 hertz.
Right, so it's just the mid-range.
Yeah, actually, that's one of the things that Scott Wilkinson over at AVS Forum does. When he goes to the cinema, he brings along an SPL meter, and he sort of checks the average sound level throughout the thing. And he's like, a lot of modern movies, if they're A-weighted, they're hitting that 85 dB average. But if you Z-weight them, meaning no weighting at all, they're actually a lot louder because a lot of bass-heavy passages sort of get filtered out by that A-weighting. But there's a lot of dB, there's a lot of sound pressure going on from that bass. Yeah. So but that's what it means. It's an 85 dB average, which means certainly the speakers and the LFE channel can at some points be playing quieter than 85 dB. It's not like that's the quietest it ever gets. So average peaks, that's what's going on there.
Right. And we've talked about that before on this, and it's good to refresh our memories.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because it's easy to get confused with so many numbers getting thrown around.
Yeah, and then this is where it gets confusing, and I understand where he's coming from too. Reference volume in the AVR with a relative volume dial and then a room EQ program like Audyssey will give 0 dB, the same level as in the commercial theater. True or false? Okay. In a perfect world, it would, right? But, But what it's doing is, I mean, it's just like we talked about yesterday with Audyssey saying, Chris Kirikaka saying you might want to change the reference volume based on, or the reference offset based on what material you're using because it's not all mixed the same.
That's right.
So you get a Blu-ray, and I know for a fact I've got some Blu-rays that are mixed a little hotter than other Blu-rays.
Yep.
It's just the way it is. So if you had a reference, if you had a Blu-ray or a source that was mixed at 85 dB with 115 dB peaks, or 105 peaks and 115 with the subs, and you put it into your AV receiver that was properly calibrated, the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But that's not the way it works. So.
Yeah, but the important thing is that, what's happening is very often they are remastering the soundtrack for the home. And that's a good idea because the home is a much smaller environment. There are many fewer people in your living room than there are in a full-size commercial movie theater. It's a very good idea that they remaster soundtracks for the home. And when they do so, they might choose, now this is a studio-level decision, but they might choose to master it at a level that is the same loudness as in the theater or quieter, maybe even sometimes a little bit louder. It's up to them. What you're doing by running Audyssey and setting your volume dial to 0 dB on the front readout there is you are equaling how loud it was when they mastered it for the home release. So what they heard in their dubbing stage when they were making that Blu-ray disc for the home, you are hearing it at the same loudness now. That's the important part to remember. So it's very possible that is a different loudness than it was at the commercial movie theater, but you're hearing it at the quote-unquote correct loudness, at least the same loudness as what it was on the dubbing stage when they made it.
Right.
Yeah.
So he asks, when test tones are used to level mesh speakers, they're played at 75 dB, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that is true. Chris Kyriakakis, I think I'm starting to get that name. Mentioned on the Audyssey forum that Audyssey Dynamic EQ does nothing above 75 dB.
Mm.
Nick thought that human hearing was most linear at 85 dB, so Dynamic EQ should still be boosting the bass a bit at 75 dB to get it back to be perceived as linear by us. This leads him to believe that the reference volume at home is 75 dB, while the theaters in the mastering studio is 85 dB. Is this true? Well, No, we just said that last part was not true. We already addressed that. Now, I'm a little confused. I want to believe that Chris's statement that saying that nothing is done above 75 dB means that they don't play anything louder than 75 dB when they're doing their calibration and stuff, because they don't.
No, it's not quite that. So there's the first part, which is the calibration part.
Right.
Now, it's really important to know that even though the test tones coming out of your AV receiver are meant to read 75 dB C-weighted on your SPL meter, that's what they're supposed to read, that does not denote reference volume. No. That is just saying we have a calibrated signal level. We know how loud it's supposed to be. It is supposed to be negative 30 dBFS, negative 30 decibels full spectrum. And that full spectrum is the important part, because that's saying the maximum loudness, right? The maximum loudness we know is 105 dB in any of the given speaker channels. So they are sending out a negative 30 dBFS test tone signal. So since we know in reference to the maximum loudness how loud this test tone signal is, then we can make sure that we're reading that correct level on our SPL meter. That doesn't mean it's reference volume. It just means that the test tone signal level is equaling what we're reading on our SPL meter, and that way we can calibrate. We can say, all right, we're actually measuring the same loudness as what the signal says to be. That's the important part. This thing about dynamic EQ and what Chris Kyriakakis is saying is that when there is a sound that is already 75 decibels or louder, dynamic EQ won't boost it. And the whole point of dynamic EQ, it's not quite to get us to a linear, perceptually linear, it's to get it to perceptually audible. So the issue was, let's say there is a bass note, and that bass note is, the signal says it should be 85 dB. That's how loud the signal says it should be. And you turn your master volume down to negative 10 dB. All right, so that bass note now will be playing at 75 dB, and you will still be able to hear it. So even if you have dynamic EQ turned on, dynamic EQ isn't really going to boost that bass note. It says, look, I basically understand that you want this movie to be quieter, right? Like, you don't want to listen to this movie at full reference volume. You want it about 10 decibels quieter. Well, you can still hear this bass note, so I'm not going to turn it back up to 85 dB, which is where it would be if you were listening at full reference volume. It's like, no, you can still hear this note at 75 dB, so I'm going to play it at 75 dB. I'm making everything 10 decibels quieter. That's okay. But let's say you turned it down to negative 25 dB on your dial. Now that note that's supposed to be 85 dB is only playing at 60 dB. And you might not hear it, because we don't hear bass very well below about 65 dB. So now dynamic EQ is going to come along and go, well, now this bass note is only 60 dB. You might not hear that at all. I'm going to boost it up to at least 65. I'm going to boost it up at least that much so that you can hear it again, so that it's not just silence where there was clearly supposed to be a bass note. So it's not that they're trying to always get you back to 85 dB. It's that they're just trying to keep everything that you should be able to hear audible. That's all dynamic EQ is. So what he's saying is that 75 dB, they don't bother boosting it. They allow things to get 10 decibels quieter. That's fine. But then if you go below that, then dynamic EQ will kick in and start making things louder when they fall below that, so that you can still hear them.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, otherwise, it's like everything would always be that loud if you turn dynamic EQ on it. That's not the goal.
That's not the goal, right?
Yeah.
Luke sent us an incredibly eloquent and complimentary congratulations for our 500th episode. So thank you very much, Luke.
Yeah, it was really, really nicely written. I really appreciate what he had to say there. So along with the other things that were sent in for 500, Luke really took the time to write something special. So I appreciate that.
He did say, I think the thing that I saw, he said, I am happy to say Google is no match for you. Oh yeah, we do the Googling for you. So there's that. So yeah, or at least Rob does. I do just a little bit.
I do rely on Google, that's for sure.
I was wondering why I was like squinting at this thing and I forgot to turn on my thing. So Luke is the fellow who wanted to replace his Andrew Jones Pioneer Center speaker for clearer dialogue and higher output capability in his small room. To answer some of our questions about his setup. Number one, his concern about off-axis response comes from the fact that he does frequently have guests over, and he wants everyone to be able to hear the dialogue clearly. All right,
fair enough.
Uh, Laudable gold there. His center speaker is mounted above his 50-inch screen. It is angled downwards, and the front is flush with the front of the screen.
All right, so screen, speaker above it.
Yeah.
The speaker is not recessed like some people's are. It's flush and then angled down.
It's not. This is not a. Is it mounted in? Is this a speaker that's mounted in the wall then, or is it?
No, it wouldn't be in the wall if it's flush with the front of the screen. It would have to be.
If the screen was wall mounted, it would be in the wall, wouldn't it?
It wouldn't be in the wall. I mean, there's some depth to the TV.
How big is this?
The Andrew Jones? It's about 7.5 inches, 8 inches deep, I think.
Well, I mean, if it was one of those real thin ones, it could definitely be. Well, anyways, that's making a difference. All right, well, say it's not. His room is highly reflective with plaster walls, a hardwood floor, windows, and wooden furniture. The only absorptive items are the people in the room. But he's planning on adding a rug to cover over most of the floor, and he does have a coffee table between the seats and screen, though. Actually, that coffee table's not your friend, dude, but let's go on. He agrees that he needs room treatments. You do. He would like suggestions on what would be the least expensive, most effective, and not hideous. He likes the DIY movie poster acoustic panels by AV Rant listener Rob W., which we will put the link of in the podcast
if you come to avrant.com, first of all, that is already posted there, but you'd have to dig back in the older entries a little bit to find it. So we will have the links to the things that we talk about right in the show notes for this episode. So avrant.com for that stuff. Yeah,
so least expensive, most effective, and not hideous. Well, thicker is better.
Yep.
Generally speaking, air gaps are good too. So a 4-inch thick panel is as effective as a 2-inch thick panel with a 2-inch air gap. So you can build the air gap in by making a 4-inch thick frame.
Yeah.
Which is what GIK does quite a bit. If you like what listener Rob W did, you should definitely do that. A lot.
Yeah, it doesn't get a whole... I mean, especially if you want an actual image of like a movie poster, you can't do much better than what he did there. He used spoon flour to print on fabric. You can buy the fabric from them. We normally recommend their quilting weight cotton. Or if you want a wider panel, they have something called... I forget what it is. It's one of their polyester ones. It's right in the instructions that Rob W gave. Yeah. So he describes if you want a wider bolt of fabric to handle a wider panel that you're making. But you can buy the fabric and have posters printed on it right there at Spoonflower, and then you make your own frame out of some wood that you buy. You get some insulation like Roxol Safe and Sound, or just the pink stuff is also perfectly fine for this. And put the fabric on it. That's about as inexpensive and effective and pretty as you can get.
Yeah, that if you can do it yourself, do it yourself. It'll be the cheapest way to do it. Yeah. All right. He wanted to clarify that he's mostly happy with the sound already, but that he's eager to try a speaker upgrade in general. He's never tried more expensive speakers before. So when he says he needs a new center channel, he's just looking for a noticeable upgrade in sound quality in general. He figured going from a $90 center channel to a $400 center speaker ought to allow for that. So it's a balancing act. He doesn't want the center to stick out like a sore thumb compared to his Andrew Jones Pioneer Towers, but he also doesn't want to hamstring his center speaker choice. Eventually, he might upgrade all of his speakers. So how does one decide on which new speakers to buy? He's looking at the Ascend Sierra-1 center, the SVS Prime center, the EMP Tek R56CI. They all look very different from one another. Do they actually sound quite similar? If so, why do they use such different designs? And if they sound markedly different, how do we know which one to choose? This is a learning experience for Luke, and so we really appreciate our guidance as he moves into new price points. Well, all right, let's kind of like back this up a little bit here.
Sure.
So what he's really wanting to do is to get much better intelligibility, from what I understand, wide dispersion, and good coverage across the entire room. At the very beginning, I said that coffee table is not your friends. I don't know what your coffee table is made out of, but if it's highly reflective like anything else, it's just another thing for the sound to bounce off of and get to your ears. So an upgrade in furniture might be in order as well. I mean, I know that we're talking about $400 speaker, and you may not want to buy something, but you know, my parents bought themselves some. It's like a coffee table, but I guess you can flip them over, and it's a cushion on one side, and you flip, and it's a tray on the other, so that you can put things in it or something. I don't really like it, but my parents like it quite a bit, and it's plush, which gives it not quite the bouncing effect. You can turn it over and use it as an ottoman if you so desire. Stuff like that would be better than having a glass or wood coffee table in front of you there, if that's an option.
Yeah, like in general, very often what we're talking about on this podcast is trying to think in terms of what is the weakest link in your system, or what is the part of your system that is holding your sound quality back. Because it's very easy to say, oh, if I buy a better speaker, I should hear a big upgrade. But sometimes it's not actually the speaker that's holding you back. Sometimes it's the room, or sometimes it's the way things are positioned in the room, or sometimes it's just a really bad calibration. And sometimes that's the thing that's actually holding you back more than the equipment yourself. Now, I think he's right. I think going from the Andrew Jones Pioneer speakers, which are frustratingly good for how cheap they are, I've got to say. But that's one reason I love them. But honestly, you have to spend a good amount of money to get a speaker that I would just say in out-and-out terms is flat-out better than the Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers in every way. You have to spend a goodly amount of money. Now, I think he's approaching that. I think some of these ones that he's considered, it's like, yeah, you listen to them in almost any setting and they will sound better. But what we're trying to get across is we think there are other things going on in his system that are maybe holding back the clarity of dialogue that he's after even more than just the speaker itself. So it's important to address those things.
The rug will help. There's no doubt about that. But the room treatments, making sure you're, I mean, if it were me, I would not be spending $400 on a center channel right now. I know you want to, and I want you to as well. Okay, let's all get on the same page here. We definitely want you to spend money on more speakers. We would love that. I think that you will find that you will enjoy your new speakers more if you fix your room first.
Right. Yeah, what we don't want you to do is spend a whole bunch of money on new speakers, get them in there, go, it sounds a little bit better, but not nearly as much better as I was expecting for the amount of money I just spent. And that could be because of your room. That
has happened on this podcast before. We've had somebody, remember the Sierra-2 guy, emailed in and said, I bought these things, they don't sound that much better. And we're like, well, what does your room look like? And all of a sudden we're like, yeah. This is, we're not being apologists for the speakers or whatever, and we're not discounting what you're saying, but if we had known, we
want you to get good value for your money. That's the goal. Yeah.
That's the whole point. The point here is that I think that right now we focus on the room. So Luke, focus on the room, get those room treatments made, get, DIY the heck out of that stuff, get your wife involved or whoever else you have to. Think about how you can add more plush and absorptive materials to your room, and do that first. Do all that first so that your Andrew Jones Pioneer speakers sound as good as they're going to sound, and then upgrade them, and then see what a big difference you can maybe get with the money that you... Now, all the speakers that you've chosen are fine. I think out of the two, I would probably be... three, I'm sorry. I would very much be looking at that EMP Tek myself. I've heard...
That is a very large center speaker, though, and he's got a small room.
Yeah, it's a massive speaker. So it would... I mean, I think he's looking at it like, well, it's big, so they'll have good coverage and stuff. That's not exactly how it works. But,
I mean, the thing that it can do over the other two that were mentioned, the Sierra-1 center and the SVS Prime center, the thing that EMP Tek can do is play much louder. And that is not surprising. It is a much bigger speaker with more drivers than any of the others. So that's not a shock. I like his question, like, we recommend all of those speakers.
Right.
We talk about that they all have good sound and that they actually match fairly well, as long as you're going for a pretty neutral type of tone, that you're not going for a specific, house sound, that, they can probably match fairly well. So he's like, well, they look tremendously different from one another, but are we actually saying that they sound quite similar? And if they do, then why do they look so different? I mean, that's a very reasonable question to ask.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why things look differently. And just because we say they sound similar does not mean they sound exactly the same. I mean, they just can't. They got different drivers. But, and I've said this before many times on this podcast, and I'll continue to say it, a speaker designer is like an artist. They are comfortable with their mediums, whatever they might be. So an artist, you take an artist that is very prolific in charcoal and you hand them an oil brush and a bunch of oils, and they're going to look at you like, I can't do anything with this. Or maybe they can do something, but it's not nearly as good as what they could have done with their medium of choice. And this is the way speaker designers are. So they have their personal favorite drivers, types of enclosures, driver configurations, crossover materials, designs, everything. You look at RBH speakers, and speaker design after speaker design are they just have very similar elements. If you tore them
Mhm.
apart, you would see some really common elements that go into every single one of their speakers. That's why they kind of sound the same.
Yeah.
They sound very similar. They're, some speaker designers are going for a flat frequency response, and how they get there is completely different. And where their drivers fail, or where they have to make compromises, and where they're comfortable making those compromises is going to give their speaker a slightly different sound than other speakers.
Right.
That's just sort of the way this thing works.
Now, to me, if Luke is just hell bent on buying a speaker right now, and that's totally fine if you are, because I get that. If you are, I mean, I would kind of recommend going for the Sierra-1 Center because, first of all, it will definitely sound different than your Pioneer Andrew Jones speaker. I can promise you that. Even if you don't change your room, you will notice a difference in sound. Now, will it give you everything you want without changing your room? I'm not 100% sure on that, but you will definitely hear a difference, for one. And then, it is the only one out of those speakers that were mentioned that you could upgrade further if you wanted to. You could upgrade it. You can upgrade just its tweeter and its crossover together, or you could upgrade it all the way to the Sierra 2, which would bring it to a ribbon tweeter and a different woofer and a different crossover. The only thing you're keeping is the cabinet. But you can upgrade it, meaning you don't have to throw everything out. You can, spend a little bit less money than going all the way up. So if this is a journey for him and he's thinking he might eventually keep upgrading speakers, that is an upgradable speaker, which is kind of a cool thing.
And we do recommend a lot of speakers all the time, but Luke, you're way too early in this process as far as I'm concerned for you to be saying what speakers should I buy. I think you need to go out and listen to some speakers. I think you need to get out there and go to some local shops, the high-end shops, the low-end shops, any place that you get yourself into, and just hear some stuff, and then come back to us and say, I heard this, and I thought it sounded amazing. It wasn't in my room, and it wasn't there, but I liked this, and this is what I liked about it. And there, I think from there, that's where we move. I would hate for you just to take our word for it that speakers are good. They are good. Every single one you've got is good.
He doesn't totally have to take our word for it, though, because SVS, Aperion, and Ascend, when it comes to the CBM 170, the CMT 340, and the Sierra 1 out of Ascend's lineup, and that's one of the ones he's considering, free shipping both ways from all three of those companies. So to me, if going out to stores, there's a lot of places now that don't have a lot of stores around, which is a shame, but it's certainly possible.
It is true.
And not everybody feels comfortable going out to an audio show or something like that. Well, those are three companies you can get their speakers into your house, listen to them in your room, and send them back all for free. So there's no reason to not do that. Like, order all three of them and send them back. Just take advantage of what they're offering, for sure.
Still think you should do the room first, though. That's just me. I think we do the room first, and then we worry about the speakers later. All right. Chris. That was fun. Okay, Chris's living room is 14 by 9 feet wide, 11 by 9.
14 feet 9 inches.
Yeah, 11 feet 9 inches long, and 8 feet high. So so I don't know, a little under 15.
A little less than 15, little less than 12, 8 feet high.
But it's open to an 8 by 11 kitchen, so that adds some dimensions there. Plus, there's a stairway leading upstairs with no door to close off the upper floor, so it's a billion square cubic quadratic feet.
A lot of cubic feet going on there.
Anyways, he's using a 720p 50-inch Panasonic TV, sitting about 8 feet away. The sound system is a 5.1 Yamaha HTR 3065. He says the sound hasn't disappointed him all that horribly. Dialogue could be improved, and music is all right. He wants to know if we think it's worth it for him to upgrade a piece at a time. Is this living space just too much of an acoustic disaster to even try? And if we do think he should upgrade a little at a time, where should he start? So these speakers, because he sent us a video, and I watched it because it was short. Thank you, Chris. That's how I watched your video.
He knows. He's heard Tom.
It's got to be short. And 2 minutes was perfect. So, yes, I watched it. These speakers are tiny little...
They're like home theater in a box speakers.
Home theater box speakers, and he's got them on these little stands and stuff like that. He's got them on stands to either side of his couch, and his couch is right along the back wall. And then he's sitting facing his TV, and to the right of the TV, if I remember correctly, is the stairs going up.
Yeah, they're like basically behind the TV is the stairs going up is
Yeah.
kind of what's going on there.
Yeah. That's what I meant, but I didn't explain it correctly. And to the left of the TV is where the kitchen area is,
Right.
which goes in the L shape. So it's going to be
past.
Yeah. So, anyways, the surround speakers are pointed at his head, if I remember correctly, on stands. He asks if that was right. You could elevate them a little bit. I don't really think you need to. I think that's fine the way you have them placed.
They're mostly fine.
He's got the other speakers on stands on flanking his TV, and then the center channel above the TV.
No, in this one, I think his center. I remember his center speaker because it was
right.
on a stand and it was recessed. Like there is plenty of shelf space in front of his center speaker. Now that's a super, i.e., free thing that you could do is just bring that center speaker to the front of that shelf, because right now you're getting crazy reflections off of that large amount of shelf space that's in front of your center speaker right now. Just move your center speaker forward. That will help your dialogue intelligibility without costing you a penny. So that's one thing.
So acoustically, as far as your speakers are concerned, you don't have a lot of distance between you and the speakers. So having small speakers is not really much of an issue. And if you want to start upgrading speakers, I don't think there's any reason why you can't do that. The acoustic disaster part, which I would not call this an acoustic disaster, is that you have so much cubic feet to pressurize with your subwoofer.
Right. Yeah.
That's going to be your issue. But it seemed to me that he's sitting. Well, first of all, he's not even sitting in the center. I don't think. I think he sits off to the left, in the left chair. So I don't even think he's sitting directly dead on center, anyways.
Right.
So if you're the only one down there who cares about bass, it looks like this is like a basement. I think it's got to be a basement, like a basement.
It's either that or it's a ground floor and then an upper floor. It might be ground floor.
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah.
Looks like you have lots of freedom to put stuff around wherever you want to put it. So you could just get another subwoofer and place that one in wherever it sounds best for you, where at your seating area. So it's certainly something that you could do one piece at a time. I don't see any reason why you couldn't. The speakers are clearly, at least in my mind, they're fine because you're sitting so close to them. But you can surely get something else, that's going to sound a lot better.
Yeah, because that was definitely home theater in a box speakers, home theater in a box subwoofer. So I mean, let's go through the parts that he has. His TV, your TV is fine. Now, at some point, maybe you want to upgrade to a 4K TV with HDR. Okay, if and when you want to do that, obviously that's going to be a big step up. But there's nothing wrong about your TV. Your TV's fine. It's a fine size for the distance that you're sitting. So I wouldn't start there. I would say I'm all about big to small, getting the most difference that you can for the money that you spend. That's my approach to it. So I'm like, where you're going to notice the biggest difference is either getting the subwoofer upgrade, because you will definitely notice a difference there, or speakers. Speakers or subwoofer is where I would start. What do you want more? Because there's no wrong answer here, right? If you're like, I want dialogue and music in general to be a clear upgrade, then I would say start with your front, left, and right speakers, and maybe the center too if you can afford it. But start with your front, left, and right speakers, because he talked about music listening is one of the things he wants to improve. So if that's what you want to improve most overall, start there. If bass is the thing that you're like, I gotta have more bass, then you can definitely upgrade your bass. So those would be where I start. And you can absolutely do this piece at a time. There's no reason not to.
Yeah, there's absolutely no reason. And believe me, we've all been there. I mean, that's kind of how we all started. We all had a system that we were like, I have surround sound. I kind of don't want to show it to anybody because I'm, you know what I mean? Because I'm not sure if it's good, and I kind of feel like maybe it's not, and that sort of thing. It's kind of Frankenstein. Mine was super duper Frankenstein, so we have all totally been there, and it's perfectly fine to Frankenstein yourself up with some speakers as well. Knock yourself out. Find something you like that you listen to, and you can go small. That's the thing that's amazing here, because you're so close, you can go really super small.
Yeah, like some Prime satellites or something would be a big upgrade.
Prime satellites, the NHT Super Zeros, some of those little birds that you talk about with Focal.
Yeah, the Focal birds, the EMP Tek E3Bs.
All of those would be good.
And the Pioneer Andrew Jones speakers would also be an upgrade.
Those would be fantastic too, and cheap. So
Yeah.
although, in fact, all the ones we're talking about are fairly inexpensive.
Yeah, all
So,
those ones we just mentioned, those are
yeah.
all fairly inexpensive. So yeah, if what you want is new speakers, you don't have to go insane, and you will. All of those will be an upgrade over your home theater in a box speakers, no
Yeah.
question. So
You might have to buy some stands though.
yep,
Just
yep,
be prepared for that cost as well. Uh, let us know what you do, dude, because I'm very interested.
yeah.
Jonathan. Jonathan read an article posted on Audioholics about extremely high output speakers. A couple of quotes in particular caught his attention. I did not read this article. I skimmed the pictures because they were very good. A consequence, this is a quote, a consequence of employing such powerful drivers for home audio is that not only can they stay clean at enormous loudness levels, they also remain extremely linear at moderate levels. End quote.
Okay.
Second quote, when speaker drivers are only used within a fraction of their mechanical capacity, they are more easily able to reproduce the signal with accuracy since drivers are kept far away from conditions that threaten linear playback, end quote. So Jonathan asks, is this true? The reasoning sounds a bit like saying a Ferrari would be better on a normal highway because it can go way faster, or that a super high wattage amplifier is better because it has tons of headroom you'll never use. But will a speaker driver really be more linear if it barely moves versus a driver with longer excursion? All right, so two things here. It's what they're saying, at least in my mind, is both right and wrong. Okay, to me, it is right in that you can push a driver to the point where it distorts and where it deforms. So if you take a speaker that is unable to play as loud as you want it to, the driver itself, the material, the cone, if it's a soft dome tweeter or an aluminum dome woofer or something else, they can distort. So what they're saying is, if you're playing something softly, it will not distort, and therefore it can be more. It will not distort, basically.
Yeah, I think they're maybe addressing one of these ideas because sometimes people take these very high efficiency, extremely high output capable speakers and they go, well, they're just not appropriate unless you want to listen super duper loud. Sometimes that's like a thing people throw at them as like a criticism or something. Yeah. And what they're saying in this article is that isn't the case. Even if you don't use their crazy high output capabilities, they're still very, very linear speakers. So I think that's a little bit what's being said in those quotes.
And I'm kind of okay with that, but but that does not address any issues the driver material has with things like ringing or with distorting at certain frequency levels, frequencies regardless of how loud they're playing. That the whole idea of crossing over a driver into from a tweeter into a mid-range or a mid-range into a woofer is because when you try to play certain notes with a tweeter, it's just not going to be very effective, A. Right. And B, it is going to start to distort no matter how loud or softly you're playing it. It's just not capable of maintaining its rigidity as it's trying to be pushing out a specific frequency. So therefore you cross it over to something that can't. Well, a poorly designed speaker, I don't care if you're only listening to it very, very softly, it's still going to distort if the crossover is inappropriate or that it's poorly designed or something like that. So I agree with what Rob just said, and that's I was trying to point out as well that that speaker, if you're playing it softly, just because it's a high output and whatever, it doesn't mean you have to put it in an auditorium. It just means you don't have to put much power into it to get it to play as much as you want. The amplifier people don't want to tell you that. They're like, oh, well, no, you still should probably have like a 1,000-watt monoblock on it.
Just because you can. Just because it can absorb it. Yeah. I mean, the other side of it, though, and I think the part maybe Jonathan was thinking is, it's not going to be more linear than an also linear speaker that can't play as loud, maximally, but you're not using it that loud, right? Yeah. So it's fine to have a smaller driver that, to play the same loudness, a smaller driver will have to move farther in and out. That's just displacement of air. Either you have a larger surface area or the thing moves farther in and out. It has a longer excursion in order to displace equal amounts of air. Now, as long as the movement of that driver remains pistonic, it removes straight in and out, not deforming, not wobbling or something like that, then you're fine. As soon as it starts to wobble or distort or whatever, strain in some way, bottom out, whatever it is, then you've got distortion. Then you've reached the limits of that driver. So, I think what Jonathan was asking is like, are they saying this is more accurate than another speaker? No. I think it was the way that I described it. They're just saying just because it can play loud doesn't mean it's inaccurate when it's quiet. They can be both. So that can be an advantage.
And not only can they be both, they should be both. I mean,
they should be both.
They should be. They should. You know, it's like we say when Rob has got his 2 ultra subwoofers in his closet size home theater. He just doesn't turn them up very loud. It's not like they don't play anymore because it's too soft. They just don't play very loud because they just go, they do what they have to do. And they're not over there going crazy because they're trying to fill up this room with bass. They do what they need to do, and they're like the most super chill subwoofers ever. They're like, oh, we got the cush job, baby. The amplifier is like, don't even wake me up. I'll just, whatever power you need.
Actually, the amplifier might be sweating because it's like, look at how much power I have to turn into heat because you're not using any, you dummy.
That's right. Okay. Dave is using a Marantz SR6010 with a 5.1.4 speaker setup. After experimenting with various configurations, he settled on 5.1.4 with top, front, and rear heights as his labels.
That sounds perfect. That's exactly what Dolby recommend, and I would too. So I like that.
Anyways, recently he watched Inside Out on Blu-ray with his kids. For some reason, they wanted him to start the movie before he had a chance to try out every available audio option. Those monsters!
The nerve.
You're a terrible parent. You have got to teach those children to respect the audio options that we have to test them all right now. I agree with your parenting. Wait, no. I'm very confused. All right, anyways. But he knows that the Blu-ray disc had both the dedicated 5.1 mix and the 7.1 mix available in the setup menu. He doesn't have surround back speakers, would it make more sense to use the 5.1 and the 7.1 track in the setup, which will work better for the Marantz upmixing. Does the 7.1 mix give the DTS Neural X upmixer more positional data to work with? Well, it doesn't give it any positional data if it's not mixed, object-based mix. So it gets it 0. No matter which one you use. I would probably go with the 7.1, though it's probably 6 of one, half dozen of the other, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I've seen this on some discs that have both a dedicated 5.1 mix and a dedicated 7.1 mix, and they are different mixes. Someone there had to sit down and make a 5.1 mix and then make a 7.1 mix. Maybe there's different mastering on them too. It's possible that they don't sound identical. They should sound far more similar than different. Yeah. I agree with Tom that it's basically half dozen of one, 6 of another. Like, there's not going to be a tremendous difference audibly either one that you choose. You could sit down and go through it, but this wouldn't even be consistent disc to disc. You might find one disc where you're like, you know what? I put it on 7.1, and when I use the Dolby Surround Upmixer or the DTS Neural X Upmixer, I thought the 7.1 sounded better on this disc, but then I put in a different disc, and the 5.1 sounded better because maybe it was mastered differently, right?
This is one of those better not to know situations.
Almost.
It's going to drive yourself crazy because you're going to start testing it every time. Your family's not going to want to watch movies with you anymore. Listen, Daddy, if we're going to watch a movie, you go do that audio stuff right now, okay? While we're eating, because we're not going to sit there while you go back and forth and try to figure out which one sounds the best. We don't care. Just turn on the movie.
Yep.
That's what it's going to be.
Yeah, there's no hard and fast rule for that.
I don't have a daughter, but I imagine that's exactly what she would sound like. I think she hates me a little bit. All right. Scott has a Denon AVR-X1000 and is using just 2 speakers for the moment. He uses hits a front and a back speaker now. He uses you can't do that, but that would be amazing.
2 surround speakers up front and nothing else.
That's right. He uses a Fire TV. I don't remember this question. All right, anyways. Did you add stuff to the list? Because
not since last night. This was here since Sunday evening, so.
All right, he uses a Fire TV stick to watch Netflix and is able to send Dolby Digital Plus audio to his X1000. It isn't consistent, but sometimes. S sounds do not sound right at all. Okay, so this is a problem he's having when he's sending Dolby Digital Plus audio to his X1000. He gets a weirdness with the S sounds. He doesn't know exactly how to describe it, but switching this to the stereo audio track always solves the problem. Do we have any ideas? I know Rob does, and I don't want to take credit for your finding.
Actually, it was very handy that Jonathan mentioned the whole DTS X update, because that got me to look into firmware releases for various receivers, and I was like, oh, I didn't actually check the AVS forum list of what firmware updates came out for the X1000. The X1000, I think, was released in 2013 or 2014. It's a few years old now. But, you know, AVS still has a log of all the firmware updates that came out with it. Well, back on February 26, 2014, there was a firmware update, and amongst the several things that were addressed in that firmware update, they specifically mentioned Dolby Digital Plus audio from Netflix, sometimes causing noise issues with the X1000. That firmware update, that was one of the issues that it was there to fix. So, Scott, have you done a firmware update on your X1000? Because that really sounds like a very possible culprit right there.
Is the X1000 one of the ones that are network, so it can do it over the network? It might be one of those ones where you have to download it.
I'm pretty sure that one has an Ethernet connection, but if it doesn't, you can go to Denon's website. Actually, we'll have the link to the list of the AVS forum one, which has the link to Denon's website. Sometimes you do have to.
Very well be maybe that he doesn't have it networked anyways, because he's using the Fire TV, right? Stick to watch Netflix. That's right. So it could be that he doesn't have it networked, so he wouldn't have automatically gotten the updates.
That's right.
It is worth mentioning to all of us out there that, you know, they do push updates, and if you're not paying attention to them, you may run into a problem that gets magically solved or paused.
I spend too much of my life doing updates for things. My stupid car gets firmware updates, so there's too much of my life spent doing updates, but it happens
every
a lot.
time I think, why do I still use the Xbox to watch Netflix and all these other things? I remember how long it takes the PlayStation to update every time it gets a firmware update. It is the absolute worst. It is the worst. All right. That is our short +1 episode, the second barrel, the double-barreled 500 episode
spectacular
bonanza.
This is over 3 hours of AV rant in 1 week that we've reached.
I'm exhausted by it. I don't even.
It's getting to like 3.5 hours. You put it all together. It's pushing that.
So.
But we're all caught up. That is all the questions on our docket. So.
Yay, that's great. So that means we do need more questions. But let's also remember, too, that there is going to be a slight format change coming up with AV Rant. We will be having our podcast will always be the same, but the videos will be chopped up into smaller, more bite-sized pieces for our YouTube audience instead of the big 2-hour, or maybe in this case 1 hour thing that we're doing right now. So let's thank our listeners of the week. We have Chris, Ephraim, and Lee for the donations. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, Chris, Ephraim, and Lee, thank you guys so much. Really appreciate those donations.
That's right. And if you want to get your question answered on this podcast, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You can also CC Rob at avrant.com or Tom at avrant.com. Come to the website, www.avrant.com, and leave us a comment or click on the Buy Us a Cup of Coffee link and leave us a PayPal donation to help support the podcast and keep us up and running. Facebook.com/avrant podcasts, at First Reflect for Rob, at avrant_Tom for me, and at Austin, TEN Pond for our producer, Austin. He has its own podcast, the We Watch Movies podcast. It is a podcast about cardboard boxes.
Mm-hmm.
All they do, it's a video podcast. All they do is take their listeners' pictures of cardboard boxes and evaluate the box.
Okay.
It's a 2-minute podcast. They do it once a month. It's the shortest podcast. It literally takes no time.
Thickness, cleanliness of folds.
I really don't know. I couldn't even make it through they showed the picture of the box. I was like, this is dumb, and I turned it off. I'm sorry, Austin, that you have a dumb podcast. You should change it to something else that's not about cardboard boxes. I don't know what you're thinking.
Maybe they should watch movies on that We Watch Movies podcast. I don't know.
Well, that doesn't make any sense.
I know.
Why would they do that? All right. For AV Rants, I'm Tom Andrew.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
And once again, happy 500th, guys. Here's to 500 more.